Okay. Well, tell me, just as we get started, any questions or thoughts on the book, Secure Love, that you guys have been reading? General feedback, or if there's something question you have or specific thing you want to talk about.
I'll be the first to be honest. I was excited and I ordered it and I read the introduction and I think it talks about Marco Polo, and then my last one I said I haven't touched the book since I ordered it, and that first time that I started reading through it. So I need to jump back in and
Yeah.
spend the time. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the second principle of the gospel comes to mind there. Um, well, repentance.
yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Cody?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Um, I think the book came at a really, really, really good time
Okay.
for me and my wife. Just kind of where we're at, kind of a maximal stress point of kids in school and life. And
Gotcha.
I think I shared this in my Marco Polo, but I feel like it answers a lot of the questions that I always kind of had in 12 step about relationship stuff, right?
Okay.
Like, I get off calls with guys where they were 6 months a year into sobriety, whatever, and they just like, yeah, my wife just screamed at me and called me all these names and did all these things, and I just kind of have to sit here and take it because it's my fault. And
Mm.
they're
Yeah.
just absolutely miserable and despondent.
Mm-hmm.
And it never struck me that something was kind of wrong with that picture, but I could never figure out what was. That
Right.
makes sense. Of course, I mean, 60% of guys would call and wouldn't recognize it as their fault to some degree, whatever that half. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's been really, really useful for my wife and I so far. So
Awesome. Yeah. I think that's a good point, Brad. In recovery, I think we have to be careful to not almost reinforce avoidant attachment, because in the beginning, when we're being super cautious and careful of the wife's betrayal trauma feelings and showing tons of empathy and owning our history, sometimes the feeling can be like, well, if there's anything wrong with my relationship, it's because of me being a screw up and an addict, and I got to own every single thing. And it's like, yes. And that's not where we want to stay forever. We want to move forward with hope and with belief in ourselves and belief in God. And we want to go from the patterns that got us into these problems into a more secure attachment pattern. So I think there's a handful of therapists out there that don't get that part. Like, they focus so much on the, hey, you've got to disclose, you've got to admit, you've got to show empathy, you've got to, help your wife who's got some probably disorganized attachment with the betrayal trauma. And I don't know, it just pushes men further into their shame and avoidant behavior. So yeah, good point. How about you, Cody? Any thoughts?
I'm not super far into it, but I've really enjoyed the first few sections where they give some examples of insecure attachment in relationships, and I just felt like, oh, okay, that's me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's interesting to kind of put a word to uh, those types of interactions and relationships. So I'm excited to see where it takes me and figure out how to find more secure attachment. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. I'm glad you guys are liking it. I wanted to share something from the book with a little bit of metaphor that ties in while we're taking a look at this. Before we jump over to the other thing I want to share for today, I think, in my experience, most people in an addiction to pornography and lust are struggling with avoidant attachment. There are exceptions to that. I think there are some people who have some disorganized attachment and some that have anxious, but I would guess the majority are struggling with avoidant attachment. And a figure that I think has a relatable story to why avoidant attachment is a thing is our friend Simba. I don't know how long ago it's been since you guys watched The Lion King. I hope you all have watched it. It is my favorite, not only Disney movie, but probably it's in my top 5 favorite movies ever because of the parallels I see with addiction and recovery. So, why did Simba develop an avoidant attachment style? Likely, I mean, first of all, he was gaslit from the time he was too young to even know what was happening, right? You can see in the story with an adult brain watching it that Simba's being set up by Scar, who has ulterior motives, who has a whole plan for wanting to take over and to get Simba out of the way. And so I think, hopefully you can see yourself in this first picture of being a young boy with an open heart and playful and, that adventurous, fun part of who you were. And I don't know what your scar is or who your scar is. But the name they pick even for his character is interesting. A scar comes from a wound, and the childhood wound experiences that you have are very real and have a massive impact. So, with Simba, the scar was he got gaslit into believing it was his fault that his dad died, when really it had been a complete manipulation and setup, and he didn't have anything to do with why his father died. So this might represent your innocence if you were exposed early to pornography. It might represent your feeling of confidence and worthiness and connection to God or to your family, your parents. So whatever that thing is, that look on his face right there, that's the root. That's the wound tied to avoidant attachments. Like, what did I do? And then, more gaslighting. You got to run away. You got to hide. You can't let anybody know what you did. It was the message Scar got. So off he goes, and he develops this avoidant attachment, which is I got to get away. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to, don't really want to go there. And, Pumbaa and Timon didn't really know this whole story. It was like, that's in my past and I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Luckily, in the end, he finds his way back to secure attachment with the help of Rafiki and a vision with his father, right? But can you relate to Simba? And a couple things in the book, page 48 is where avoidant attachment starts to be described. On page 49, the second paragraph down, it says, if you were an avoidant attached child, you had to learn early in life to give up on expressing your emotional needs or distress and push your attachment longings and emotional needs out of conscious awareness. And it goes on. I'll let you guys read more about this description, but I think there's a lot to learn from avoidant attachment in your own recovery work. If you go to page 52, third paragraph down, she identifies 3 things, 3 commonalities that she sees in her practice. And I would say this aligns with my experience too. She says, I see 3 commonalities among those with avoidant attachment. 1, a fear of failure or fear of failing. 2, a disconnection from feeling or emotional disengagement. And 3, a fear of being engulfed. And so I think each one of those is worth taking a look at from your own experience and seeing if those are fears that you have or behaviors that you can identify with. Talk with someone in this group or me. Let's talk about it, figure out how to kind of heal and change out of those 3 things.
A
And
quick
then,
question about that.
yeah, go ahead.
How would you describe a fear of it being engulfed? What does that look like? I don't know if I understand that one.
Yeah. So I think the fear of being engulfed is just being overwhelmed. Like, for example, a lot of guys, when they're exposed too young and they think about telling their parents, it's just this overwhelming, like, I don't think I can handle being engulfed with that much emotion. It's too big, you know? Or I don't think I can handle telling my wife what I did because how am I going to contain her pain and my shame and the fear of all of it? It's too much. I'll be washed over. It'll be above my head. I'll drown in it. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And so instead, we're just like, well, I'll just leave that to the side. I'm going to work on fixing a whole bunch of stuff, but I can't go there yet. It'll be too much. That makes sense, Cody? Awesome. Okay. Um, another thing, just real quick, on page 53, second paragraph down, it talks about how anger is an interesting emotion for avoidant attached people. Because sometimes we just avoid avoid that feeling and shut it out. But she says, about halfway down the paragraph, he says, if you have an avoidant attachment, you might act out anger by shutting down or using mean humor towards someone else or yourself, even. Being passive aggressive, retreating, becoming overly frustrated by little things, often unrelated to the relationship. So those are all ways in which the emotion of anger could come out if you have avoidant, instead of just being assertive, talking about it, and working through it. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on that as it relates to the book. I'd invite you to spend a significant amount of time wrestling with the stuff in those pages. There's a list of questions on page 55 that you could spend some time journaling about with avoidant detachment. But once you identify what your insecure style is, you can do a lot of proactive good things to work on healing it. Okay.
Do you think that also, just I haven't read through a lot of that stuff yet, but I was just thinking, or had the thought pop in my head of the kind of the culture that we were raised of, like, stop crying, or like just not really feeling those emotions, like, so it's kind of even an external force of like almost being taught to be avoidant.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. The pressure culturally on boys and men pushes in the direction of having us be avoidant as well. Yeah, good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Okay. Any other quick questions on avoidant attachment? Okay. So I wanted to go over something today called the Johari window. I'm not sure if anybody's ever heard of it, but it sounds like something from Africa. It's actually just the beginning of two guys' names that came up with it. Joe and I can't remember the second guy's name. Anyway, so it's not some voodoo from Africa. It's just these awesome researcher guys that came up with this insightful way of looking at ourselves and our relationships. So let me share my screen. We'll talk about it. So what the Johari window helps us take a look at is four different kind of pieces of what is known. On top is what I know about myself versus what I don't know about myself. On the left, you've got things others know about me versus things others don't know about me. And so the four windows are where these intersect in the graph, so to speak. So area number one, we often call this the arena. It's what's on public display. It's what everybody knows about me. And yeah, others can see it. People that are in relationships with me know about it. I know about it. And as you'll see as we go on, it's where we want most of our life to be lived, is in the open area. Window number two, we call it the blind spot. It's what I don't know about myself, but actually others do know about it. Maybe, for example, I've got an attribute, either positive or negative attribute, that I don't really understand or really even see in myself, but others can see it. They've interacted with me enough, they kind of know it about me. And it's like, okay, well, blind spot. Sometimes blind spots are just that no one's ever talked to us about it before, we haven't seen it. Once they do, we're interested and we do something about it. Either we enhance the positive attribute or we work on changing from the negative one. Sometimes when people see a blind spot and call us out on it and it's negative, we take offense, or we don't want to change because we actually are benefiting from this blind spot, and we shut them down. Perfect example of that is King Noah and the priests and Abinadi, right? He was pointing out some blind spots and probably some of window three that we're going to talk about in a second, some hidden or facade things, but they were happy living in their blindness. They didn't want to change, and so they killed him. Okay. That happens a lot in scripture. It seems like when people don't like what prophets are saying, they say, well, let's just kill him. That'll be better. We can shut him up. Then window number three is what I know about myself, but others don't know about me. Again, in some pieces of this, it might be positive things like I'm actually a great singer. I sing in the shower all the time. I sound awesome, but no one else has ever heard me sing, right? I'm not talking about myself, by the way. I used to be in a choir, so I've actually moved that up into the open area. I like singing, but there's some people that might be very talented at something, but they're scared to death to share it. That could be a facade thing, right? Most of facade is probably negative or detrimental. Like addictions usually live in window number three. I know what's going on. I know my actions. I know my behaviors. I know my acting out, but I really don't want anyone else to know about it. And so it's hidden. So it's the hidden or facade window. Window four is actually unknown to both myself and others. It's like, I don't know what's coming, and neither do you. And so it's just this hidden, unknown thing. Interestingly, it doesn't mean that it's unknown to everybody. It's just unknown to myself and the people around me. So an example might be things that someone with more wisdom or knowledge than me might have, but the people I hang out with and talk to and communicate with, we're all blind to it. No one knows. So one solution is to go ahead and bring in an outside source that knows more than me and the people around me know, right? So an example of that would be a prophet, someone that can see around corners. And so, in the big picture, it's why we have conference every 6 months. So we don't have so much stuck in the unknown. There we go. Okay. So, does that make sense? Any questions, generally speaking, about that? Okay. So there's some really powerful work you can do, and this kind of ties in with the secure attachment work that I've been talking about. Let me show you a way that you can engage with your wife in some work. Actually, let me share a different picture. So an activity that you can do is you take this list of adjectives or descriptors of yourself, and you go through and you circle the ones that you know are true of you. Things that, based off your experience with yourself, you're like, yep, this does describe me. And you have your wife or others that you want to do this work with do the same thing, and then they fill one out for what they know about you, right? And then you compare your lists and see, okay, if they've got the same thing circled that I do, then it's in window number one. It's open, it's in the arena. We both know it. If I've got something circled that they don't have circled about knowing about me, then that's in number 4. If they've got something circled that I don't, that's blind spot. And then if neither one of us circled, maybe it's something that I might have, but neither of us see it. And I'm going to give you some homework to look at your patriarchal blessing and to listen to conference to see if there might be some hidden stuff that you could find. But anyway, can you kind of see how that would work as far as like what you circle versus what they circle? And then there's some vulnerable work there, obviously, that would come from conversations that could be had. So this list is, these are all pretty much positive adjectives. There's another list that we call the no hurry, with an N, no hurry, of actually negative adjectives that, again, might be worth looking at as well, especially if you're gonna do some work with vulnerability. So same thing, you would circle the ones that you're like, yep, I know this about me. And then have your wife look at you and say, okay, I'm gonna circle the ones I know about him. And then any that are circled by you but not by her, those would be things that are still kind of hidden. Things that you both know would be in the open. Things that she circles that you didn't might be a blind spot. And then if you go to your patriarchal blessing and say, okay, is there anything that the patriarch saw that God wanted me to know about that I'm not seeing? And there could be both blind spots as far as like attributes or talents or gifts that I haven't really developed enough and I could add to becoming better at or knowing more. Or there might be weaknesses, temptations, things that I need to watch out for. Okay. So I'll send you guys these handouts. There's one that's got just a blank Johari window. So you could write the adjectives in whichever window you think they belong. Okay. And then the work is to try to take anything from 2, 3, or 4 and try to move it towards number 1, the open area. Okay. Talk to me about questions you have about the window itself or about the homework. If you don't have any questions, that means I'm a perfect describer and teacher of things.
Well, you are, Jed, but I do have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my question is this. I know for me, sometimes my overcriticalness kicks in
Yes.
when I see kind of negative adjectives, and I don't know, I'm worried about circling ones that aren't real, if that makes sense, or that I'm making a mountain out of, and it's really a molehill, right? So what would your recommendation be for that?
Yeah, great question. I think I would recommend praying before you start this exercise. Pray for both courage to confront things that are dysfunctional, but also pray for compassion for yourself and for your spouse. Like if you're going to expose something, or if your wife is going to expose something that might be a blind spot, you need to pray for both humility and thick skin. Because if you're too sensitive to that and you just use it as a reason to beat yourself up and think of yourself as a, horrible person. That's not going to do you much good. So have some thick skin while you process and think about, what could I do about this blind spot? How could I strengthen myself? And maybe pick an adjective from the positive list that is also true of you, that if you developed it more or focused on it more, would overshadow the weakness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. In a way, it echoes back to step 4 of the 12 steps, right? So when we're doing the work of taking our own personal moral inventory, I believe that to do that right, you need to do a fearless moral inventory of your character defects, but also character attributes. Because what are you going to do when you get to step 6 and you're supposed to become ready for God to remove these defects of character, and then 7, have him actually ask him to? That's pretty scary and daunting if you're not really confident in what your character attributes are. Because character defects have a purpose. They prop up our ego, they protect us from vulnerability, they help us get what we want. Now, not in the best ways, right? But they kind of work. If they didn't work to get some outcome that's, somewhat desirable, at least in the short term, we wouldn't keep using them. So anyway, it's kind of scary to let go of character defects unless we're really confident in our character attributes that will carry us forward in a different way. So this is kind of some step 4 feel to it, right? So, excuse me, these. Yeah. All right. So I think I've got another thing I want to show you, but I don't want to give you too much to where it just like feels like overwhelming. So I think I'm going to save the other scale for next time. I want to just have you focus on processing through this Johari window, doing an actual conversation with your wife, teach her a little bit about it, and then do the work of like, let me do my own Johari window work. Let me use my patriarchal blessing as a guide for blind spots or for the unknown. And then let me have a separate conversation with my wife where I ask for her feedback and insight. And if she's open to it, give her some feedback too. And again, the point of it is that we're working towards more secure attachment. So it goes without saying, this isn't like your chance to, beat up on each other and like vent old, resentments. It's to say, I love you enough to share with you insight that I think will bless your life and help you become better. And I'm going to receive from you in that same way, that same paradigm, that same way of looking at it. Okay. So does that make sense? Any questions on how to do the homework or conversations to have? Yeah.
I think it makes sense. I'd say my first thoughts are though of being avoidant and not doing it. So
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, thanks for being honest, man. That's true. If you're an avoidant attached person, this is some significant vulnerable work. But the good news is if you'll do it, it's like a gentle way to work through an avoidant pattern and to become more secure, even with yourself. Right? Like going back to the story of Simba, what do you think? What do you guys think Rafiki's job was? Like, what role did he play in that?
He strikes me as a challenger,
Yes.
like in a really effective way.
Yeah.
It's like, where are you, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Asking him questions in a somewhat annoying fashion, but enough to make him think.
Yeah. Yeah. Did involve a couple thumps on the head, right? But um, he had a definite purpose in his words and his challenges. Yeah.
I think he reminded me of the Spirit, which is, I feel like, also a challenger. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Hmm. Yeah. I think he was. I think he was pointing out to Simba some of the blind spots, maybe, um, and maybe also some of the hidden. Um, so yeah, and it changed his whole trajectory, right? Like listening to Rafiki, letting the challenge wake him up a little bit, and kind of stepping into the journey, even though he was not sure of what was coming. Really helped him. So yeah, I would say the book, this Johari Window stuff it's kind of like a Rafiki thing. It's a challenger. It's also a bit of a coach. If you'll look at it and kind of look at yourself and let others give you feedback, it's a really powerful way to grow and change and do better. So
And I wanted to say, I feel like the book has definitely been the Secure Love book has definitely been a place to open up blind spots for both my wife and I. Right?
yeah,
For me, I think I've always known that I internalize stuff, right? Beat myself up, etc.
mm-hmm.
What I didn't know is that I was putting like everything going wrong on myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm never speaking up for my needs and appeasing everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize it got to that. But my wife actually had a good conversation where she's been reading it too, and I kind of gently to kind of asked her some questions about like, hey, did you feel like you had to express some anger when you were young in order to be heard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some questions to kind of get at because I wanted to understand, right? Does she feel like she has some like attachment stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she thought about it and talked to me, and again, she's like, "Wow, I did not realize all of that was in there."
Yeah.
And she's like, her exact words is like, "Wow, I'm just like my dad, and that's terrifying." And I was like, "I know that feeling." So
Yeah.
we had a good conversation. I feel like the book's been very, very helpful and getting right at some of those blind spots that we have.
Good.
That were keeping us kind of in a poor relationship state, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Brad, thinking of your story, um, I think an interesting thing that I notice with people, like, if it's okay, Brad, can I talk a little about what you've shared about your dad?
Yeah, please go for it.
Okay. I feel like your dad had a lot of his life in the facade. It was hidden stuff that he had some personal demons. He had some personal um, narcissism that I see. And when you're a child of someone like that, who has a lot in facade, it's really confusing and hard because they don't let you see any vulnerability, but you can feel chaos from it. And so the only thing that makes any sense is to say, well, it must be me because every time I look at my dad, everything's fine. Like maybe there's a couple moments of breakdown, but everything looks kind of fine. Like, and the way he presents is as if he's running everything just fine and dandy and good. And um, so either it's me or maybe the church or whatever that's screwing up. And so someone else's facade window can really mess with your thinking about yourself because, again, you're being gaslit into thinking the chaos in my life and the things around me it's all because of me. And if I was a better kid, if I was more obedient to my dad, if I could make him happier, then I would be lovable and good enough. But it's just not, there's no way to win with a scar figure or a scar mentality in our lives, you know? And so I think maybe also the powerful work of avoidant attachment and looking at your previous experience of what you experienced as a child can be powerful too, because if you had that happening and you can finally lay it at their feet, not to give yourself permission to continue on in your addiction, but to say, this garbage, this stuff isn't mine to own. You know, like with Simba, he confronts Scar and fights him, and you know, even to the very end, Scar is trying to manipulate him into letting him live, and then he throws the ashes in his face, or the cinders, to try to blind Simba. There's just sometimes there's no way to to make peace with someone who's got such messed up ways and attributes, you know. But letting them go and being able to move forward after you send that all to the fire, like Scar falls into the fire, right? There's some symbology there. You can be free to start working on rebuilding some amazing things, you know. So yeah.
Oh, definitely related with the Scar gaslighting.
Yeah.
Turns out all the things that I thought were wrong with me that my dad said are things he was scared about himself, I think.
Oh
So.
yeah, absolutely. Yep. And I'm not saying you should take a Molotov cocktail and go throw it at his house tonight, but symbolically, in that internal family systems work we do, one of the things, there's wind, water, fire, or earth. Fire is a good one, I think, for a lot of people. It's like, let me burn the burdens of the past, you know. We do it in that realm, and so we don't have to become arsonists in our world today, in the real world. So, yeah. Okay. I think that's it for today. Let me look at calendar. I think we'll go to Saturday, the 26th of October for our next phase 3 live Zoom meeting. So if you could put that on your calendars, I will do better next time at sending out a reminder, hopefully even a day before. I was thinking of it, but I was up on the mountain without a signal, and then when I got home I forgot until 9 o'clock, and I was like, oh geez, there's my calendaring skills on display again. I apologize. So yeah, October 26th, we'll meet again, and in the meantime I'll do like I've been doing with the Marco Polo. I'll send you a reminder on the day that you're up. So challenge for you would be talk with your wife about the Johari window. Go to your patriarchal blessing and look at Johari window, and listen to general conference. Same thing. Have a blank sheet open as you listen to talks, and listen for inspiration of what belongs in what window, and then do some work from there. So, all right. Thanks, guys. We'll
Thanks,
see
Jed.
you next time.
Yeah, thanks, Jed.
See you guys.
Thanks, Jed.